Hello, Nicole. How are you?
Hi, Alberto. I'm great, thank you. Thanks for having me here today.
Well, thank you. Thank you for joining us, and we are looking to your presentation, and I'm sure it's going to be very inspirational and enlightening, and also with, I think, practical steps that you took at Heineken to improve your learning, and especially in these difficult times, I guess.
Yes, absolutely. We started this journey quite some time ago last year, and I'll share a bit about that. But for sure, the last couple of months has certainly accelerated the journey to a large extent. So, really looking forward to sharing some of that with those who are on the line today. So I'll just go ahead and get right in. So I'm actually calling in from Amsterdam. So good afternoon to those of you who are in my parts of the world. Good morning, good evening if you're dialing in from somewhere else. Thank you for joining the session today. I'm really looking forward to sharing this journey that we've been on at Heineken, and particularly sharing around how we've democratized learning across our organization, especially in the last couple of months through COVID. So just a little bit about me. So my name's Nicole. I've been working in the fields of learning and development for most of my career, and the majority of that time I focused mainly on supporting organizations to drive large-scale learning transformation. So I started my role in Heineken actually only around a year and a half ago, but it does feel like I've been sort of I'm right at the beginning of my tour still. So I'm still learning. I feel that learning is really important to my role as well. My team at Heineken, so I work in a team of fantastic, amazing, talented people. We're still learning every day in order to drive the learning culture in Heineken. So how do we really embed learning in Heineken? So as I say, we're really at the beginning of the journey. But I hope that what I share with you today will give you some food for thought, especially if you're embarking on something similar. So if you're looking to implement new learning technology, global content portfolios in your organization, and if not, if you've already been on this journey before, maybe you can resonate with some of the things I'm talking about. So, just a little bit about Heineken. So we have a global footprint. We have about 85,000 employees working across the globe. We operate in around 190 countries, and we have 80 operating companies. So our operating companies are more or less like their own businesses. So it's important to set that scene because it also presented some challenges during the journey that I'm going to share with you today. But one thing that I want to share is we pride ourselves in being the world's most international brewer. So that's a good fact about Heineken. In terms of our ambition, so we have a strategic ambition in Heineken. This is to mainly from a people perspective, it's to engage and develop our people. We have 4 specific key areas. We treat these as our North Star when it comes to people development across the organization. So these are developing great business-driven leaders, growing our talent pipelines at all levels, building critical capabilities and strengthening functional excellence, and then finally, leveraging diversity and our culture. So also good to share a brief word about our learning organization because it sets a scene for this journey as well. So especially some of the elements of challenge and also the elements of opportunity in the journey. So we operate as a decentralized learning organization, which basically means there's only standardization where needed. So for example, in our global content frameworks like for leadership, like for inclusion and diversity, for people management, but more or less our operating companies and even our functions have their own learning and development teams who also drive their own learning and development strategies. So we really, in the global office where I sit, where I work as the global digital learning lead, what our job to do is to support our operating companies and our functions in activating learning across the organization and mainly also the strategic learning offers that are created from the center. So that's something about our learning organization, and that leads me on to the next slide, which is why did we actually embark on this journey to change our online learning agenda and experience in Heineken? So basically, and very unsurprisingly, it all started because we did a really extensive organization-wide people needs analysis back in 2019, which feels like a lifetime ago when we think about what's happened with COVID, etc. But even back then, we had identified some key opportunities to leverage learning at scale. So specifically also linked to our people ambition. One area was around developing great business-driven leaders. So how can we basically use digital learning at scale to support managers with their leadership expectations? So things like giving feedback, having difficult conversations, talent mastery, etc. We saw that there was a huge need for this across all of our operating companies. So it was really an opportunity to scale the offer across the organization. And then the second area was around building critical capabilities and strengthening functional excellence. So we also saw some key critical capability areas in the organization, like, for example, digital upskilling. Our inclusion and diversity agenda became really top of mind as well. So we also wanted to make sure that we could build something scalable, something that would deliver impact across all of the organization as well. So in terms of the people strategy, we had that on the one hand, but then we also had a bit of sort of come to Jesus moment. So we really looked inwards and we realized, okay, even back then, pre-COVID times in 2019, we knew that the needs and expectations, of our learners had changed drastically. And basically, we as L&D weren't keeping up with that demand, that expectation, and neither, to be frank, was our learning ecosystem. It was not ahead of the curve in that regard at all. And some of you might have seen this research that was conducted by Deloitte, Burson by Deloitte a couple of years back. I know it's quite old, but I think it's important to look at this, because even then in 2019, I think when this research came out, we could see that people were completely overwhelmed, distracted. There's so much going on in their lives, and they were so digitally switched on. And now, fast forward, a year later, and you can only imagine that people are even more overwhelmed. They're feeling even more distracted than ever, and they probably have way less time to switch into learning mode. So whether it was now or back then that we needed to change, it's a really good thing that we've got to where we are, and so I'm looking forward to sharing some of that with you a bit later. So in terms of what we knew that we had planned is that we wanted to change how people were learning in Heineken. We wanted to deliver to their expectations, and so we started to look at our 4 key priorities, basically. So we, as a learning team, global learning team, we identified that there were 4 key areas that we really want to focus on in order to really make an impact, to change the culture of learning, especially online learning in Heineken. What we did is we presented each of these 4 priorities for action to our HR leadership team. This was at around mid-June last year. And we somehow, through presenting this, managed to get unanimous buy-in. So firstly, we wanted to really enhance the learning experience, so provide a much more intuitive end-to-end learning experience when it comes to online learning for our users across Heineken, so all 85,000 employees. We never used mobile learning before this, so we really wanted to start offering learning anytime, anywhere, on any device. We then also looked in a second area, which was around closing those critical skills gaps, which I mentioned earlier. So how can we really start to, on an organization-wide scale, look at closing gaps like in our leadership, in our people management capabilities, digital skills, and inclusion and diversity. We looked at how we can achieve scale and impact. So we really wanted to ensure that that's what we delivered. And also offering continuous learning. So how do we also ensure that this learning ecosystem that we want to develop really is embedded into the flow of work as well. So, of course, at that time when we presented this to the HRLT, and in retrospect, I think, wow, this was quite a vague sort of list of priorities, and we definitely needed to do a lot more work later on to drill down into them. But at the time, we did have unanimous agreement to go ahead with this plan. We had 12 months to do it, to achieve all of these things, these vague things. And we also agreed a budget. So we had a budget in mind to really make this change, to transform how we were learning in Heineken. So the next step for us was, okay, so it all looked great on paper. We had these priorities in hand, but then we started to really look inwardly. We really started to get a bit deeper into the nitty-gritty, and we saw that there were some major barriers that were standing in the way. After doing a bit of benchmarking, we knew that our learning technology just wasn't cutting the mustard at the time. So we had a sound learning management system in place. This was rolled out at 2 years or a year prior. This was success factors. But it was used for compliance learning, and this is really what it was equipped to deliver. And not much more than that, not in terms of what we were trying to achieve. So at the time as well, we had another outdated learning platform. So it was a legacy platform that was even being decommissioned by the vendor themselves. And it housed all of our functional and cross-functional learning. But the usage of that platform was also at an all-time low. So people just didn't want to engage with it. The UX was poor. The content was completely underwhelming. It just left a lot to be desired. And in fact, even the content in there was really compliance focused within the functions as well. So learning for people in Heineken, especially online, it seemed a bit more like a chore than an actual opportunity for development. We needed to change that. Secondly, we had a lack of high impact and scalable digital learning content. So for the specific capability areas that we wanted to focus on and scale across the organization, we really just had nothing. What we did, we had maybe pockets of stuff here and there in some of our operating companies or in some of our functions, but those really existed in sort of siloed local learning management systems that they were using. And even these, they were sort of older digital formats like PDF documents, so they weren't very engaging. And also they weren't scalable because they were only offered in certain languages, for example. And for 85,000 employees in Heineken, you can imagine the language demands are huge. We did know, however, that there was a huge appetite for learning across the organization because we were getting messages from vendors like Udemy, like LinkedIn Learning, like Coursera, that actually there were people who were buying their own personal licenses from Heineken to learn because we in Heineken just weren't offering that kind of quality content at scale. So we knew that there was an appetite, and again, we needed to overcome this barrier. We needed to find a way to deliver this. Then, of course, going back to what I mentioned earlier about our operating model, so the fact that we didn't decentralize, we really, of course, historically, we developed some global sort of initiatives like our leadership expectations, our people way playbook, etc. But from a standardization perspective, when it comes to technology, we weren't really, especially from governance as well, we weren't really doing that very well. So a lot of our local operating companies and also our functions started to build their own platforms, started to buy their own content. You can imagine that there was a huge amount of fragmentation across our online learning landscape. There was huge cost inefficiencies in this, but also big barriers to creating scale and impact in online learning. So we needed to see how we could sort of make a coherent journey together, and so join all these roads that were leading off in different directions at the time. So what was our way forward? We had we had 4 key enablers for driving basically for overcoming the barriers, but also moving towards those priorities that I mentioned earlier. So the first one was around validating the needs of our end users. The second one was around stakeholder alignment. This was a really important one. It sounds like so obvious, but it was for a decentralized organization. From a learning perspective, maybe some of you resonate. This was hugely, hugely important. Thirdly, we needed to look at technology. So we needed to actually find the right technology to answer to the prayers of our people from a learning perspective. And then also, fourthly, we needed to look at content. We needed to source content that would meet current and also future demands for closing critical skills gaps. Because let's face it, you know, the demand for skills is changing on a daily basis. We needed to make sure that we could really cater for that demand as well and be future focused. So I'm going to go through sort of each of these ones, each one one at a time, and maybe just pinpoint some of the most important things that for us we needed to focus on in order to get to where we are today. So first of all, from a learning needs perspective, of course, we had some assumptions. We already knew that our learning technology was poor. We knew that, you know, we were getting anecdotal evidence from the organization that we needed to improve things. But did we actually do a thorough analysis of the learning needs of our people? No, we didn't. And as you can imagine, it's very difficult to do that for an organization of 85,000 employees. So we needed to think about how best to achieve this through a persona-based approach. So what we did is we really employed this design thinking approach. And we thought, okay, so if we do this, we can get a cross-section of the organization from different parts of the business, so either from different geographies, maybe from different functions, in different roles, and we interviewed them, and we gained a lot of insight about what it was that they would need in order to learn effectively in their day jobs, and also just generally in life. And what we did is then we took another cross-section of the organization and we dived into, okay, what if you were in the shoes of this person, what would you need to effectively learn? And we got a huge amount of insight from that. And to be honest, I think that also helped us with the next phase, which was around stakeholder alignment, because without that data-driven understanding of what our people needed, it would have been a lot harder to get sort of, you know, our stakeholders on board in our functions and opcos. So this slide it really resonates because there's this quote from, I think it was Winston Churchill, if I'm not mistaken. A strategy only lasts as long as the first encounter with the enemy. So we had all this great planning in mind, but unless we had our stakeholders in our functions and opcos aligned, we actually wouldn't be able to move forward with this, especially for those of them who were using their own local systems, etc. So we really needed to paint a picture of, you know, what's in it for them. We needed to act like business partners, really empathizing with them along the way, influencing without authority, especially the authority that possibly comes with a centralized operating model. And we needed to show some real value for what they would gain from coming with us, moving with us with this global online learning agenda rather than against us. So we presented a clear sort of vision of the current state, and then we walk them through what the future state would look like. And we really try to make this as desirable for them as possible through really understanding their needs, through performance consulting, through active inquiry, etc. So it was a journey. This in itself was a journey in the journey. The next thing that we looked at was technology. So the first thing, actually, when we were really focusing in on the technology bit, and I'm sure many of you listening will also resonate with this, is we had about 30 learning technology vendors, and we realized that there's simply no such thing as a one-size-fits-all solution. We would never find one platform that would answer to all of our organizations' sort of needs and requests and prayers. And we also realized very quickly that a mundane sort of learning platform checklist with some vendors or some vendor pitches would not really give us the confidence we needed to buy the solutions that we were planning to deliver for these priorities. So we also actually took a design thinking approach with our vendors. So we shortlisted a number of vendors based on their capabilities in several areas, like, you know, all of the sort of key areas that you see in LXPs, learning systems today. And what we did is we presented, again, a number of organizational personas to them, and we said, right now in your demos with us, we want you to enact each of these personas in your system. So each persona gets a learner journey, and within your system, show us the features, the functionalities, the requirements that were needed for this learner to really learn optimally in this environment. And what we came up with is actually, like I say, not a one-size-fits-all solution. We ended up with two different solutions that we procured. One, a vendor called Cross Knowledge. They are they're very well known for sort of the formal macro learning and also for their ability to really customize in terms of branding, which was important for us at Heineken because, of course, we have thousands of different people, but also brands and operating companies, all with their own different needs. So that was important. And then also for Filtered, we really liked the solution because it had excellent personalization engine, which was powered by AI. So it offered learning based on sort of a learner's unique skills signature. And it's become a really important enabler now, Filtered, for our global digital upskilling program, which I'll share with you in a bit more detail later. Important to say that these vendors were not just selected because of their features. We looked at a number of other criteria. Cost, let's face it, is a big one, especially in today's age. Then we looked at their ability to integrate, their ability to scale, because they had sort of language translations, etc. So there were really a number of things that we looked at there. In terms of content, so we knew that we weren't going to go for a build approach when it comes to content. We just had too many capabilities that we needed to focus on delivering for in these 12 months. But also we know that the capabilities that we needed to deliver for the future, we needed to have something that would be very quickly delivered, scalable across different languages, etc. We didn't just take a checklist again from the internet or from another organization who'd gone through something similar. We really looked inward and we said, what are the criteria that are really important for us as an organization when it comes to delivering a global content catalog that caters to a variety of needs, not just cross-functional, but also even within our functions, because we needed ROI as well. We needed to show that whatever catalog we use can really be scaled across different initiatives, different functions, different operating companies, etc. So these are some of the criteria that we used as well. And maybe good to say before I move on to, so where are we today after going through this journey of selecting technology vendors, content, getting stakeholder alignment, understanding our users, etc. I just want to say that by November last year, so it was only in November, we started to work, closely with some of our functional capability academies, our opcos, and then of course also the vendors themselves that we selected to develop a minimum viable global solution. So we launched it in June this year, so only 4 months ago. That's why I say we're really at the beginning of our journey. I must reiterate that for us to do this in such a short time, so it was a 4-month build phase, we really had to embody this mindset of think big for the long term, but small for the short term. So really be MVP focused, minimum viable product. And we also needed to work very agile. And this was important not only internally to have the skill to really be able to adapt, to be agile, but also from our vendors. We needed to make sure that they worked in that mode as well. So have we delivered on those 4 priorities, those very vague priorities that I was sharing with you earlier? Well, yes, I think there are some things that we've achieved, but I think we've still got a long way to go. So when it comes to, for example, enhancing the learning experience and offering continuous learning, we have now launched a global one-stop shop for learning across Heineken called My Learning. And within the launch phase, so when we launched in June, we already had all of our 9 functional capability academies up and running in the platform. And I mean, this was a huge thing even, for the functions to really get on board, because they were the business owners as well. And so we needed to upskill them on how to use the solutions, how to, really build a UX that would work well for their audience needs, but also embed or integrate content into the platform that would meet specific criteria that we had in place in terms of quality of content and experience as well. We also launched other initiatives as well, like the Inclusion and Diversity Initiative, which has been a big hit across Heineken, especially with the our new CEO has come in, and this is a huge part of his agenda. He's really pushing inclusion and diversity, so we love seeing how much engagement that's had. We've also, of course, integrated with LinkedIn Learning, our content provider. I don't know if I shared that earlier, but we did end up choosing LinkedIn Learning. And we also built a cross-functional academy called the Greenhouse, so in fitting with Heineken's green colors, where people can go for learning on sustainability, on safety, and other internal capabilities needed across functions and not just within the functional silos. And one of the big programs that we launched around developing critical skills is DigiFit. So DigiFit is our digital upskilling program. This development work for this particular program was actually ongoing in parallel to the solution implementations I mentioned in the previous slide. This program was actually built in response to our organization's need to basically radically upskill the organization on digital. This was particularly after mid last year, we added a new pillar to our ambition, which I shared with you earlier on, which was to connect in a digital world. So this integrated solution that you see here, it was actually powered by CrossKnowledge, so one platform, and then also with Filtered, which is the AI-driven learning recommendations platform, and we named this filtered solution DigiBot. So it acted as a personal fitness assistant, pushing personal recommendations to learners on key skills to develop. And of course, we also plugged our LinkedIn Learning content to this offer, so that, and we combined it actually also with the curation of other informal sort of micro learning topics, like from articles or podcasts or videos, etc. So 4 months since launch, when we're talking about achieving scale and impact, we've had 18,000 unique logins so 4 months since launch, and we see things going in the right direction, right? So on average, we have around 2,500 unique users onboarding to the platforms per week, and that's without any compliance-driven push. We have no compliance learning in this platform, and we don't intend to keep compliance learning in this platform. So it's mostly just pull marketing campaigns that are being run by our opcos, our operating companies, by our functions, and also by us globally, so our small global learning team. And we also have an average of about 8 connections per user per week for those who are loyal users, which I think is a very decent loyalty rate as well. You can see as well also some of our adoption percentages across our regions, and then also across our functions as well. And I think the build on this will be, so we have a Power BI dashboard in place, but we also need to start looking at how we quantify other KPIs like curiosity, which is what I heard in the last discussion, and other elements that are a little bit more intangible, harder to quantify. But this is definitely the next step in our journey. And also other things that are really important for our focus for the next year. I actually don't know if the next year is actually a good indicator. I think maybe the next 6 months is better because things change so dramatically on a month-by-month basis, on a day-by-day basis. So we really treat our ambition as a very much an evolving beast. But what we are focusing now on is enhancing our online learning platform. So really building out some of the key features and functionalities that we haven't yet activated because we're still in early phase. Also building out our Power BI dashboard, so our integrated online learning reports, and looking at how we can really drive some actionable insights from those. And then we're looking at, of course, engaging and developing our learning and development community, because we've heard a lot, I think, in the last 2 days of this conference. L&D really needs to have a different set of skills to what we needed even 2 years ago. And it's really important for an organization our size, with a lot of L&D stakeholders across the company, to be able to offer them those upskilling opportunities themselves as well. And then we're looking at, of course, expanding our content portfolio to meet changing demands. So we've got a big strategic initiative happening at the moment, driven by our executive team around building 5 key capabilities, so capabilities for the future of our organization. And we imagine that will really feed into our learning strategy. Our CEO, by the way, he is very much a sort of advocate of being a learning organization. So we have a lot of buy-in and power there, which is great. And then finally, embedding online learning into our HR ecosystem is important because we really want to make sure that learning isn't just a standalone thing that happens in the organization, that it trickles into every sort of touch point of an employee's experience, whether it be their performance conversations with their manager, whether it be, onboarding, etc. So it's really around embedding that into competency management, etc. So that's a big part of the journey next. And I think that's it from me. Time out. Would love to hear if you have any questions, or maybe you also have some insights and some advice to share with me. I'm really open to hearing.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Nicole. You heard people clapping. It was a very good presentation. And the feedback also in the comments is, it is great about the flow and actually sharing actual stuff and how to deal with stakeholders and putting things into practice. It was very interesting because every time as you were speaking, I was, getting these questions in my mind. And then suddenly after that, you just put a slide there and you answered the question already. But I still got some. So thank you for this.
Good. No questions would be concerning.
I'll go through the questions on the app basically first, and then if we still have some time, I will ask some more questions from myself. So one that you answered already in the chat, but I'm not sure if everyone saw it, is from Danny. Hi, Nicole. What's your take when talking about upskilling and reskilling from a courses and resources perspective? How can they augment one another? So if you can give an answer to everyone, that would be great.
Yeah, so if I take the example of our digital upskilling program, which, as you said, I mentioned a little bit about it, but I also said in the message, it was really the tip of the iceberg. So we did a lot of work when it comes to how we built that framework around foundational skills development in when it comes to digital in Heineken. And it all started with really sort of this external, sort of outward looking, what is it that other companies are doing? What is it that other vendors are talking about? What is it that other thought leaders are saying about foundational digital skills in Heineken? And then we started doing a lot of inward looking sort of work where we said, okay, well, this is what they say is a baseline standard. So this is what people should know in this topic based on what external research is saying, based on what other companies are doing. But ultimately, what are the things that are important for Heineken to know? What are the important things for us? For example, we have a big program that's going on in our supply chain called the Connected Brewery, and it's really about how we really connect end to end everything, our brewery processes, our production processes, using digital technologies. So this is not generic information. This is something very, very particular to Heineken. And we needed to really tease out some of those key initiatives and key things that people needed to know in order to upskill in those areas as well. So I don't know if it answers your question, but we certainly did need to look at a framework. We needed to look at what it is that we needed to develop from a competency perspective, and then build our courses content through mapping processes, which, by the way, we were very lucky with our vendors because, and they're not paying me, but our vendors were great in the sense that they both of the vendors who provided content, so Filtered also has content, they were able to handpick sort of curated content on the competency areas that we wanted to focus on. And similarly with LinkedIn Learning, they did a huge curation sort of effort for us as well around what key courses or resources would be relevant for some of the competencies or skills we wanted to develop.
Okay, well, thank you very much. It does answer the question, of course. And One question, because you mentioned now content, and there is a question about that. It's usually a tough topic, but it's internationalization of everything you do, right? And you have offices in many different places, and you mentioned a bit about that in the, I think was part of your research on tools. Do you offer the content in, all the languages, different languages where you have presence?
Yes, great question. So from a platform perspective, so really when we're talking about the ecosystem, we have translation for technology, so from a platform perspective, and then we also have, of course, translations or ability to provide content in different languages. So for the platform translations, we were lucky because the chosen technologies did have translation capabilities and were available in all of our 16 languages that we've signposted for Heineken. From a content perspective, that is difficult, especially when you're looking at off-the-shelf providers. What I can say with LinkedIn Learning, they offer a content catalog in 7 different languages. So that covered some of our bigger operating companies and bigger populations needs, which was good. But we do have a way to go. For example, I have colleagues in Poland who say, we really want to drive locally the step change in online learning, but it's very difficult for us because at the moment there's not a lot of content in the platform to deliver to some of our requirements. It's great that LinkedIn Learning has these offers on what we know our needs on the ground here, but a lot of our people aren't really well spoken in English and don't understand it very well. And in this case, we are looking into some options. For example, there's options to add subtitles now to LinkedIn Learning content. We're also looking into how to automate that with some of our internal content anyway, through specific sort of video indexing tools, etc. So it's a long way, and this is definitely a big one. Maybe I should have also highlighted, and part of our ambition going forward is to make sure that we start offering to the pockets of the organization that, the few pockets that don't have that opportunity as much, maybe say, as others.
Thank you very much. Lovely answer. Another question is, once people are upskilled, do you connect skills to internal job opportunities to support career mobility?
This is a great question, and another one. And whoever asked that question, I would love to know if you're doing something of that nature, because we definitely, we're also at the start of that journey. But for sure, we're starting to look at, okay, how do we match skills to job opportunities, for sure, especially now when we're looking at, okay, again, when we think about build versus buy in organizations with employees, we really believe that we can build talent from within, but we need to have the right technology, the right enablers to do that. And technology is one of those enablers. If we have the right technology to help us match those skills to those jobs, I think we're a long way away from where we are today. But that's a process. That's another journey, maybe for next year's conference.
Okay, thank you. So we have a couple of minutes more. Let's try to cover all the questions, or as many as possible. Hi, Nicole, what a multi-dimension approach to digital learning. How often are you updating the offer? Is it, well, you just launched like four months ago, right? So I think you didn't have much time to update much of it. But of course, the problem with content sometimes is to get it, to have it up to date, right? So do you have any plans regarding these, or kind of like maintenance update plans in the near future?
Yes, that's a really great question, and completely agree. Sometimes it's not even about the fact that the content is outdated. It's that you stop campaigning around it, because often it's not what's in the platform that's driving engagement towards it. It's what you're doing outside of the platform. So what we tend to do is the offers that we have in place, we continuously evolve them, and we treat it almost like a conveyor belt, right? So we out with the old, in with the new. We try to keep it fresh. We try to build sort of weekly campaigns around some of our learning initiatives. For example, I mentioned the greenhouse. So this is a cross-functional initiative that we've developed, and we don't necessarily have to have new content each week, but we can promote content each week. So that's really helpful in driving that engagement back to the platform, building that curiosity of our people, come back for more. So really about pull rather than push. And we do the same with DigiFit. So we really try to keep that offer fresh and alive. We build campaigns around it to get people coming back for more. Because for the most part, you know, when you look at LinkedIn Learning, and this is one of the reasons we chose them as a vendor, is because they continuously update their library. I mean, I'm talking about like 34 new courses a week. So even that for us is like unimaginable to try and you know, promote all of that all the time. So we really try to pick the ones, really tease out the ones that are important to promote, ones that are good to highlight. So for example, are linked to strategic initiatives or big business news that's come up, etc. So that's really how we drive engagement rather than, I would say, update the content.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. I think, you know, it is very powerful to see, you know, a company as big as Heineken, and super diverse in terms of cultures and all the countries that you are in, and how flexible you are to incorporate not just one solution. I think that's the key. Sometimes we spend a lot of time, especially in the corporate world, to try to find one specific thing that does everything very well, and that, unfortunately, I personally believe that really doesn't exist. You cannot be the best in everything, and sometimes it's good to open up some, you know, different to different tools and to combine them for different purposes. So, well, I think that was it. We got to the end of this session. Thank you very much, Nicole. A pleasure to have you here, and thank you. It was very, very inspiring and valuable. You have some questions still in the app. If you have time to answer those, it would be great. Thanks a lot, Nicole.
Great. Thank you, Alberto. Take care, and thanks all for joining.